Good morning and welcome. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason live on this Thursday. I hope it finds you well out there. We got a lot of things we're going to be going over today. We're going to quickly mention we had jobless claims again. This report, now we get it every Thursday. It's pretty much worthless now. We're dealing with so much fraud in states. The numbers now just don't make any sense. It was lower, 200 and I forget the number, low 200s. Again, problems with fraud in Ohio and somewhere else. I don't know. It's not even sad because this should be an indicator of how things are going, but we cannot get any actual numbers. We also had some labor numbers come in worse than expected. What I mean by that, hourly wages hotter than expected. But today we're going to talk about gold confiscation. Could it happen again? What is going on with BRICS? Central bank gold purchases up again this month and up big, kind of like same trend happened last year, where central banks were buying a lot of gold, and then in the last half of the year bought even more gold, and same thing. So now, granted, it's only we'll see what the following months bring, but a big uptick in central bank gold purchasing. There is news out about are the BRICS nations very quietly stocking up on gold. They just don't have enough gold yet to launch some form of BRICS gold-backed currency. So we're going to be focusing in on those big topics today. Obviously, in 1933, when the government confiscated, gold was money, and they didn't want it to compete with the Federal Reserve note. Now, again, you'll have people argue, is gold money or not? But here's the realities of it. You don't take silver eagles. You don't take $20 gold pieces or gold eagles or gold bars to the supermarket or the restaurant, right? You don't use it in that regard. But it really is interesting. People have been making some interesting arguments as to whether or not gold will be confiscated again. Because obviously, like I said, in 1933, they did not want gold to compete with the Federal Reserve note that was backed by nothing. We're getting ready for this digital currency. Could there be potential that once again we don't want gold to compete? In other words, hey, wait a minute. Everybody's taking their digital assets and buying gold, and really the lead up to it, because we'll know it's coming. We already know, right? But as it gets closer, how many of these bank accounts all of a sudden get significantly lower because they're loading up on gold and silver before that happens? And you got to remember, the one thing that it really isn't talked about with the digital currency is the fact of the matter will be there will be insolvencies in the banks. And Jason, there's no bailouts. They need enough money in there, right, to cover losses. So is there a chance that this could actually happen? I think there is. I think Jason and I agree. We're uncertain. We don't think so. And the one thing, with Jason and I, we agree on a lot of things. We disagree on a lot of things. I think it would probably be more likely that they will tax the living daylights out of gold and silver versus trying to confiscate, just because people, especially like with COVID and the mistrust of government running pretty high right now. But it's going to be an interesting debate today, Jason, as to where we're headed. Why are all these countries buying gold? How much are they really buying? Is there going to be a gold-backed BRICS currency? And what is going to happen to gold and silver purchases here in the U.S.?
As you were talking about, gold confiscation and digital currency, that sparked a little image in my head, Joe, because we're going to talk about whether they will or will not confiscate it. But maybe more importantly is simply, will they have the ability to? How easy will it be if they want to? Maybe that's what it is. And so I started thinking, did you ever watch The Lord of the Rings way back when it first came out, the first one, The Fellowship of the Ring? There's a little story at the beginning where it talks about the rings that were forged. Some rings for humans, some for the elves, some for the dwarves. But then there was the one ring, the ring of power, the one ring that rules them all. That's the digital currency, the evil ring, the one currency that will rule them all, right? And then once that's in place, then they don't have to confiscate gold. But if they want to, it's built right into the power of the one currency that rules them all. That's what the digital currency will be, Joe. I think it's a good analogy of what we're looking at, that they will be able to, they'll have the ability to pull off whatever they want. So gold confiscation, I don't think that's on their list, but if it ever makes their list, I think they can do it with their currency, Joe.
Yeah, 800-951-0592. That is our toll-free number. The website at allamericangold.com. And when we get back, we're going to start with central bank gold purchases. Back on the rise again. A lot more names, a lot more countries doing it. And then leading into, are the BRICS nations quietly, maybe secretly, stockpiling gold? And then what will gold look like when the digital currency comes here? All of that coming up next. (800-951-0592). Joe and Jason on this Thursday. A quick look in at the markets. The Dow is up for now, up about 25 points. The S&P is down 17. The Nasdaq's down 138. Gold is flat. Silver's down again. Again, all out buy on silver right now. Silver just below, well, right at $23. The 10-year note, 429. Crude oil just went back into positive territory. Remember yesterday I told you the oil inventory reports were due. They came in late yesterday. Down over 5 million barrels. Cushing, Oklahoma, down almost 2 million barrels. Unleaded gas, down over 5 million barrels. So, you take the numbers, and we had about a 10 million barrel shortage, which is seemingly like what we've been week after week after week. So right now, crude oil, just under $88. Brent crude, just under $91. And again, we're talking about what's going to happen next and where's Wall Street going to be? How do you protect your money? What's going to happen with digital currencies? Why are all these central banks buying gold? It's a sign. I'm telling you. You need to have assets outside of Wall Street. You just do. And when I talk about Wall Street, I'm talking about stocks. Talking about bonds. I'm talking about money in the bank. Those are the places you need to hedge yourself from. Check out our friends over at YRefi, up to 10.25% return. Not correlated to the stock market. It doesn't care. Doesn't care about the Fed and interest rates and Fed meetings, and it doesn't care about the lines of BS that they try to tell you about inflation. It's fixed, which means your statements are the exact same every single month. Guess what? They don't do the fee thing. No fees. Hey, if you ever need your money back, you get all of your principal back. All of it. Check them out. InvestYRefi.com. That's the word invest, the letter Y, REFY.com. Or call them at 888-YREFI-24. Of course, remember, you got to have at least $50,000. Here's the great part, though. You can use those existing IRAs. I know you got them. Take some of that and get outside of the system. You're not going to regret it. 888-YREFI-24. So, again, we'll watch the news here, but crude oil, Jason, without cheap energy, right? It's a problem everywhere, and I think this is why we're starting to see all of these countries getting out there and saying, hey, you know what? I want to hold something other than dollars. I want to hold something other than fiat. Because they're not, here's what's not happening. They're not saying, hey, I don't want to hold dollars and get me a bunch of renminbis. I don't want to hold dollars and get me a bunch of euros, or get me a bunch of yen, or get me a bunch of pound sterling. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of countries are adding some renminbi. They're adding some, but it's not an overwhelming amount. But you know what they are adding overwhelmingly? Gold, right? Institutions, which are central banks, another 55 metric tons coming off the board, according to the World Gold Council. The latest data, central banks continue to add to their reserves. China, once again, was the leader in this, in adding another 23 metric tons of the metal. It is the biggest purchaser year to date. They've let us know, anyway, that they bought another 126 metric tons. But, Jason, they weren't alone. How about this? Poland. Poland's been pretty active. They bought 22 metric tons. I mean, that's a huge purchase for the Bank of Poland. And then they said, listen, that these Eastern European central banks now kind of forming this trend where they're all starting to add. Turkey was back. Now, Turkey buys and sells gold, right? Because they've got bad inflation. You think we've got bad inflation. They got really bad inflation there. But they're back to buying another 17 metric tons. Qatar. What? Oh, yeah, another Middle East country now buying gold. They were buying gold. Singapore was buying gold. The Czechs were buying gold. Jason, it just seems like more and more of these central banks around the globe here are saying, you know what? We need to have some gold loans. And like you say, these central banks are not operating in a vacuum. They're all tied together. If you don't think the Russian central bank and the Chinese central bank and all these other central banks are talking to each other, you're a fool, because they absolutely are.
Yeah, when you've worked for decades and decades and decades to control the finances of nearly every industrialized nation on the planet, you don't really want to lose that, do you? So you're going to make sure that parties in each of these different countries that have central banks know what you know and you know what they know, so that you can game plan the next step or where it's going to head, whatever the plan is overall, Joe. And this is why they're getting all this gold, because I think there's a little hesitation as to exactly what the next economic situation is going to be, how they reset it and what it's going to look like. So I think there's a little hesitancy, a little worry. Well, this is what we're going to do. They probably have a plan in place, but how it works is maybe unclear. So when you're talking about holding dollars or holding yen or holding renminbi, this is where, we won't talk about this too much, but this is where having a military is really important, because if all currencies start crashing, gold becomes very important. If the new monetary system doesn't take, let's say the digital currency, for whatever reason, doesn't take or doesn't work, or it's not working the way they need to as soon as they need it, suddenly everyone looks around at what they actually have. And this is why the Federal Reserve is existing in the country that has a military that gets essentially $1 trillion a year in payments to continue to keep to stay strong, which is when it all blows up, Joe, who's got the biggest muscle in the room. And that doesn't mean that people listening to the show should feel safe. Well, we got a bunch of muscle. China's been building a military, and they're linking up with Middle Eastern countries, and they're trying to link up with Russia. And I don't think there's going to be a world war like some of these people are saying is going to happen. However, having a military that America will not go against, and then economically things start to break down, it matters a lot, Joe. So that's why China's been building up the military. That's why they're all over the South China Sea. That's why they're north of Australia and taking over more and more area militarily, is because they need to show that, hey, if there's a breakdown in currencies, we can exert a lot of authority over our neighboring countries. So we'll see how things go, Joe. I just all these currencies are all bad. It's all circling the drain, and we'll see what happens with the digital currency, because that's what they want to be the hero, Joe. The ultimate control over society, and a currency they control.
Yeah, and they can the amount of they keep talking about tools in their tool belt. The amount of tools that they would have digitally far superior to what they can do today. We'll get into that in a little bit. But first, Daniel McCarthy, he's a strategist at Daily FX. They trade currencies, currency traders. They had some very interesting things to say about gold. And they were talking, hey, gold's been, trending around, the 1900s. And that started talking about the U.S. Treasury, hitting a new 15-year high. The last time that real yields were this high, you got to go back to 2009, 2008. Spot gold at that point was below $1,000. And gold didn't run until after. People forget, gold ran after the financial crisis. It ran up before it, right? Got to the 1,000, right? Which at the time was a new all-time high. Then fell back during the crash, and then skyrocketed afterwards. In 2018, real yields were not even 1%. And gold was trading at about $1,300 an ounce. So he's telling you, look at what's happening here. Gold should actually be lower with real yields being this high, and it's the exact opposite, right? That's a change. That's different. When you look at the history since gold has been allowed to trade freely, the pattern usually was, hey, rates are high, gold is low. Rates are low, gold's higher. That obviously the only other time this happened was what, the 1970s, right? Rates were high, gold was high. And we're in this path again, but he says, hey, there's something new. There's a new element. They're talking about the BRICS nations, talking about countries seeking alternative to the U.S. dollar, and in their minds, an alternative to the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. So it's a little deeper. This is deeper than, hey, we just don't want to hold this many dollars. This is Daily FX saying, hey, listen, they're searching for a new reserve currency. Much has been made of the potential for a gold-backed currency to allow these countries to bypass the U.S. dollar. And McCarthy says that even though other challenges to the dollar amendments have failed, right, it's been tried before, China's role in the international gold market, along with recent behaviors of other BRICS members, could mean a different outcome. So he's hedging his bets here. He's not saying this is going to happen, but the potential is there. On a recent trip to Western Australia. So when you think about gold production, I want to throw this out there. China's number one. Australia and Russia go back and forth. Who's the second? Who's the third largest gold producer? So it's very important. He's bringing up Australia for a very important reason. He said one of the largest physical gold-producing regions globally. And when you looked at the contracts from these huge miners out there. The thing that was highlighted is that almost every single ounce of gold currently being dug out of the ground are all being put on ships going to China. And he was like, this is every contract. All of this gold is being sent to China. It's not going to London. It's not going to Switzerland. It's obviously not going to America. But Jason, this is something new where when you think about, okay, where does most of the gold come from? Now, you remember South Africa used to be number one. Now, they've fallen down the list, but they're part of BRICS. China and Russia, two huge gold producers, they're part of BRICS. The other big gold producer, Australia, all of their mines are essentially putting their gold on ships going to China.
You know, we talk about sometimes worrying if the U.S. will ever default on its debt. What that'll do to the world, but maybe we could be wondering what China might default on its debt and how it's going to try to eliminate all of its U.S. treasuries all at the same time. Maybe that's what we need to be worried about, because if they are holding all the gold at the end of that, that's a good place to be in, Joe.
Yeah. 800-951-0592. Joe and Jason here on this Thursday. $20 gold pieces. 1 through 19, $21.95. 20 or more, $21.75. Right now, gold's dead flat here, $1,925 to the ounce. Silver on silver, U.S. silver goes down to $6.35 a roll. Still the best buy, under $30 an ounce here, is the $half-dollar rolls. They're at $210. Buy 10 rolls or more, $205 at 800-951-0592. So very interesting how all of this is coming together. Right, so you look at Daily FX saying, hey, people better wake up here. Because I get what you're seeing on the TV. Oh, yeah, central banks are buying some gold, and people are diversifying. Oh, and BRICS are settling trades in their own currencies and interest rates and inflation and digital. But there may be a bigger thing at work here. The BRICS control the vast majority of the gold-producing countries. Right? China's number one. Like I said, Russia, Australia, those are the top three. And according to Daily FX, every ounce of gold being dug up in Australia is under contract to be shipped to China. Every single ounce. Of course, they've got South Africa. Right? I know, granted, they've fallen down the list, but still, they're one of the top 10 gold-producing countries in the world. And then a few other, the stands, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, right? I mean, these are countries that obviously lean to the BRICS. And the word is, the fear is that China and Russia have been taking their own gold production and without saying anything, setting it aside. Not all of it, obviously, but large portions. In other words, what they're publicly saying they hold is a big, they actually hold a lot more. We don't know if that's true or not, right? We just don't know. But a lot of people, and I mean a lot, the matter of fact, the majority of people that are in the gold trade business believe that that is the case. Now the question really today is, what does that mean for us? Let's just say that the BRICS truly are making a play to be a reserve currency, to be a global reserve currency, a dominant global reserve currency. Because technically, the renminbi is already a reserve currency, technically. Right? It's one of 6. But the United States dollar dominates it. But now the question is being asked, can and would gold be confiscated again here at home? Now, when people ask me that, I think when people ask Jason that as well, now, Jason, I'll let you answer for yourself. I normally answer that with, I don't think so. Is it possible? Absolutely. Do I think that it's likely? I don't. But the situation has changed dramatically over the last 10 years to where all of a sudden now, hey, it's a bigger possibility today in my mind than it was, say, 15 years ago before the financial crisis.
Yeah, you know what? The first thing, just to get it out there, because you did that gold special and that silver special, you know, it may sound like an old message. We've been pounding it home, especially the last 2 years. If every government and every central bank across this world is loading up on gold, you know, the smart ones, it's the only thing we need to say about what you should be doing. You should be on the phones buying the gold and silver specials that we're offering. They're loading up on it. And then Joe poses the question, well, what about confiscation? You know, I remember, and Joe used to talk about a lot, you know, the old conversation with Ben Bernanke and Ron Paul asking, is gold money? And Ben Bernanke is just trying to avoid anything about gold because it's competition for his money. Don't acknowledge the competition. People might want to go get it. So will they confiscate it? It just depends on the competition, I guess, Joe. It depends on if it gets in the way of their plan. If a whole economy of barter happens and the citizens start minting their own coins. Let's just go back to the hard times tokens I talk about from the 1830s. The bankers lost their banks, so what do? They sucked all the money out of the system. They're kind of sucking a lot of money out of the system right now, and they put a lot of hurt on the population trying to get back what they lost, and the people just started minting their own coins. And back in those days, though, the people of America, they were smart. They held ground. They backed up Andrew Jackson, and they weathered the storm, and economically we went through a windfall of profits. You know, America became economically the most powerful nation on earth after the 1830s. Well, now they have a digital currency coming, and everyone's, you know, all these central banks are buying gold. So they obviously know they better be situated if their plans don't work. Like I said earlier in the show, Joe, and if they need to do something about it, the digital currency is a dream for them. Their list, the governments and the central banks of the world have a list of bad guys, okay? And with the central currency, they can move whoever up to the top of the list and attack it. And no, are they going to come to your house and take your firearms if after digital currency the Congress passes a law that says no more semi-automatic firearms, and then suddenly everything with a trigger is illegal? They're not going to send the army or the police to pick it up. They're going to click the keyboard and shut off your money until you produce the firearms that are registered. Gold will be the same thing. It's not going to work to have a gold money system as well. It's going to still happen, but they're going to make it so expensive and so unbearable that every time you go to a gold dealer, well, we're just going to pop a 20% fee onto it. And then here today you can buy these $20 gold pieces for just under $2,200. Well, just put that $400 gold fee on there from the digital currency. Joe and Jason are selling it for $2,200, but you're going to pay $2,600. Nothing we're going to be able to do about that. Is that confiscation? Yeah, you're getting gold, but how much more do you have to pay to get it? Keep going back to it, Joe. How much freedom can you afford, right?
When we get back, we're going to talk about the possibility and why it actually may happen. That's coming up next. Eight 800-951-0592. Joe and Jason, Patriot Radio News Hour, $20 Liberty gold pieces 1 through 19, $2,195. 20 or more, $2,175. No gold tax yet. That's probably a key word. No gold fee yet. Silver rolls a silver $half. 1 through 9, $210. 10 or more, $205. At 800-951-0592. Now, this was Jeff Thomas, the Burning Platform. If you hold precious metals in your portfolio, there's a good chance you fear hyperinflation. There's a good chance you fear a crash of fiat currencies. You probably distrust governments in general and believe that governments are self-serving and have no interest in your economic well-being. It is likely that your holdings in gold are your lifeline, your hope to get you through tough times while actually being able to hold on to your wealth. Holding on to your wealth is really difficult with inflation, isn't it? Right? That's the really hard thing about it. But have you given any thought of the possibility of this lifeline being confiscated by the authorities? In my conversations with friends and associates, I have often raised this question. Here are the typical responses. They'll never do that. I'll deal with that if and when it happens. I'm not going to give it to them, right? We hear that a lot with the guns too, right? I'm not going to give it to them. And considering, now he goes on to say, considering these wishful thinking responses, it's an interesting thought that the greatest threat to gold and silver investment might not be the possibility of losing it on the speculation, right? I bought it high, sold it low, right? That's not the fear, but the government actually taking it away from you. It's a thought I've found few want to think about or let alone discuss. If you fall into this camp, you're in good company. So Jeff Thomas is willing. Hey, I admit, all the smart people I talk to and all the people I know, none of them think it's going to happen. That's crazy talk. Or I'm not giving it. You know all of them. The forecasters who I respect most highly. Maybe I'm one of those. Maybe Jason's one of those. Treat it either as unlikely or at best something we may need to look at in the future. In conversing with top advisors worldwide, the two primary reasons they believe gold will not be confiscated. So when he's talking to, these worldwide advisors at these big companies, number one, confiscation would mean the government acknowledges the reality of the value of gold. Right? That's a big one, isn't it? What are these central banks doing right now? What message are they sending? Aren't they sending this message right now? I mean, it's not like we've had 1 or 2 years of buying. They've been buying gold for like 15 straight years in a row. It's just all of a sudden, the last couple of years, Jason, it's been skyrocketing the amount of gold they're buying.
The average guy isn't paying attention. Just economics people in general, Joe. But I would say the vast majority of Americans have no idea that buying's going on.
You're right about that. You're right. They don't listen to this show, so they're clueless. But that's number one, right? That's a big one. Man, will you think the central bank and our government would actually want to admit that gold has value? Remember, it harkens me back to Ron Paul when he was questioning Ben Bernanke. Yep. Remember?
I just mentioned that last
Mr.
segment.
Bernanke, is gold money? is gold money?
Yep.
And there's a big long pause from Bernanke. Well, no,
Asset.
gold's not money, right? Number two. So what's the second other reason? They would meet far greater resistance than they did back in 1933. And it's funny, I had a comment from my grandmother before she had passed. She was young, she was like 10, 11, 12, during that Great Depression, beginning of the Great Depression. And she remembered very clearly, it was our duty. America was in trouble. We wanted to help. I do agree that this would be something where a lot of people would be very unhappy to have to give their gold back. But the situation is different. A lot of that gold, Jason, was actually sitting in the banks themselves. So when they shut the banks, they kind of had the majority of the gold already.
I'll say this about resistance. A large majority of this country believes themselves to be righteous, to be a law-abiding citizen. And if a law gets passed, the vast majority of people, even people that love gold, they'll give it up. They'll give it up. I mean, look, the masks were a mandate, and it took only a brave few were going in there not wearing them everywhere, Joe. That was just a mandate. Can you imagine if the law says turn your gold in? Come on, resistance, give me a break, Joe.
Yeah, well, I think that would come with strings. Turn your gold in or get your digital currency shut off. But again, we're going to talk a little more about this, and then I'm going to weigh in about what I think is probably more likely than an outright confiscation. That's coming up next. $800-951-0592. Joe and Jason wrapping up this Thursday. $20 gold pieces 1 through 19, $2,195. 20 or more, $2,175. Gold's up 50 cents right now, $19.26. Silver rolls a silver $half. 20 silver $half in a roll, $10 face value roll, $210, 10 or more, $205. Again, that's 800-951-0592. Now, would our government do it? I think the first thing that we have to admit, that whether our government wants to admit it or not, the rest of the world's banking central bankers that aren't part of the what I'll call the G7, because really a lot of the G20 is going to the BRICS. They're saying, yeah, no, gold's important and we need to own it. But because gold technically isn't a competing money, I think what's going to happen here is going to be very simple. As this thing starts to unwind, more and more people are going to be running to gold. We will be the busiest we've ever been. Why do I say that? Every crisis, go back when Patriot, we were around 1996. Well, Y2K, Eric had a pretty good year in 1999. Then it got real slow. Then he had a good year when the debt bubble crashed, right? 9/11 happened as well, right? But he had a good year. Then it got slow again. And then he had an even better year. By now I'm here, right? We had the best years ever during the crash, right? And then COVID came. We shattered all of the crash records with COVID. And I guarantee you this next crisis will be even busier yet again. And the answer is simple. Back in the mid-'90s, only wackos wearing tinfoil helmets bought gold. Matter of fact, Right, the Bank of England sold all of their gold. It's an ancient barbaric relic. It's no barbaric relic anymore. Matter of fact, it's hard to find somebody who actually, poo-poos buying gold. Normally when you talk to me, somebody, well, I thought about it. Right? You're no longer the crazy uncle at the Thanksgiving table. Well, you may still be crazy, but your gold and silver buying now is like, hey, how's that working out for? How does that work? Right? They're asking you questions. As money starts leaving the bank before the collapse, right? Before the digital currency comes, I think you're going to see our government panic. And I think the more likely scenario is they will add some form of fee onto the purchase of gold and silver. That's just what I believe. I think it can be fairly significant as well. 10%, 20%, 30%, something to try to dissuade you from buying it versus an outright confiscation. But again, I think that tells you buy all you can now before it really gets ugly, because two things. Number one, we know the price is going to be higher, but number two, are they going to tax it? Are they going to put fees on it? Are they going to confiscate it?